in this conflict, if you look at the slide, that 20% of the Tamils live in the, or Tamils and Muslims live in the northeastern province, but the people who were killed, 69% Tamils and 2% Muslims, so 71% of the people killed in the northeast were the minority people. Nearly about 1 million people have been displaced within the country, and another 1 million have been left the country as refugees in different parts of the world. And most of the people have experienced multiple displacement up to 20 times, and also due to the tsunami in 2004. Another feature of Sri Lankan politics is that militarization of society, and if we could see the slides, compared to India, Pakistan, even Pakistan, the number of army personnel for population is secretly high, and so the expenditure. And this another slide, that's what I think for the people to look at this, and this is a arms supply to Sri Lanka, and one thing country is missing is of Japan, which of course gave a lot of aid to Sri Lanka in soft money. But you could see that China, India, Pakistan, and Israel, USA, and UK. And the second slides show you the rest of the countries supplying arms, most of them from Europe. Bulgaria, Ukraine, Slovakia, France. And we were talking about the root cause of conflict and how we can prevent is something worth of thinking about it. Paradoxically, several of the international arms and finance supplies to Sri Lanka are also involved in peacekeeping negotiations. Now, the second aspect of it I want to touch on is the human rights abuse. Unfortunately, Northeast became the perfect breeding ground for the human rights violations. Torture. UN Committee on Torture expressed concern in 2005 of widespread torture and ill treatment mainly committed by the state's police forces, and sexual violence and abuse of women and children in custody, included by law enforcement officials. Disappearance. Sri Lanka had the highest number of disappearances in the world in 2007, according to the UN Working Group. Media freedom. Sri Lanka was ranked 162 out of 175 for media freedom, the worst amongst all the democratic countries in the 2009 Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index. Genocide Watch, the New York-based genocide prevention project, included Sri Lanka as one of the 8 red alert countries. And another feature of the Sri Lankan society is medical professionals in any country act as advocates for health and vulnerable. Unfortunately, this has not been the case in Sri Lanka, where there has been a paucity of data on the burden of war on morbidity and mortality. In the annual health bulletin of the Sri Lankan official document excludes data from the northeast of the country. Sadly, Amnesty International has also shown that medical officers have been complicit in covering up human rights abuses. Now, then coming down to this international presence in Sri Lanka and the corporations, a large number of international agencies and local NGOs are involved in humanitarian work in Sri Lanka and have been for a number of years. The Colombo-based Consortium for Relief and Rehabilitation was established in 1984 and is an early and positive example of collaboration between humanitarian actors in Sri Lanka during the conflict. Some international agencies from Norway, UK, Germany, and Denmark have been in operation in Sri Lanka for more than 2 decades. ICRC had presence since 1989. The United Nations, in particular United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, has played an active role since 1988. First, the program has been monitoring and facilitating returning refugees from India, and second function is to provide protective, neutral engagement during and after fighting. In 1980, Sri Lanka was one of the first examples of UNHCR providing assistance to people in their own country and creating open relief centers. But as the head of the operations, Bill Clarence, said, without financial and military support on a decisive scale, neither UNHCR or any other agency could be in a position to provide assurance for the physical safety of the Tamil civilians in the war zone. UN has commented that humanitarian workers are without question human rights defenders who help people stay alive in times of conflict. With particular reference to Sri Lanka, 3 independent UN experts have stated that deliberate targeting of humanitarian workers is a serious violation of basic principles of international human rights and human rights law and the Declaration of Human Rights Defenders, 2006. And you've seen the example first, Army fired an UNHCR vehicle carrying humanitarian aid, alleging that it did LTTE, which is the Tamil Tiger members. And second example, you could see that MSF vehicle was targeted, and after protest they had a commission to inquire, and they said they abdicated the responsibility for what happened, and MSF withdrew from providing service there. Between January 2006 and December 2007, 44 humanitarian workers were killed or disappeared, all incidents except one taking place in the northeast of the country. Following the murder of a Red Cross volunteer on 14 December 2007, the European Union urged the government to protect humanitarian workers and investigate deaths and bring those responsible to justice. Though NGO presence is welcomed by many civilians who see them as buffer between the warring parties, but the state and state supporters thought they are terrorist sympathizers, parasites, and traitors. Nevertheless, UN and humanitarian actors have played important roles in facilitating negotiations and mediating ceasefire. 2004 tsunami hit during the time of relative peace and stability, and the subsequent influx of NGOs and financial aid went some way in keeping the peace a little bit longer. Sri Lanka presented the unusual situation of a central government providing relief aid to people under the control of the main opposition group, the LTTE. It was when aid in terms of monetary and human resources started to flow, regional disparities became apparent, that political tensions were exacerbated. In January 2008, the government withdrew from the ceasefire, which was negotiated by Norway, and as a following that, the ensuring expulsion of NGOs and UN bodies after 20 years heralded the beginning of the final stage of the war. The government was arguably preparing for a final war without witnesses. The war on terror gave the government the legitimacy to impose a military solution to a long-standing ethnic problem. At this stage, it is a shame that the International Committee did not respond and did not recognize this early warning sign. International actors could have stood together and collaborated to counter the expulsion as they did in Darfur and Sudan. But of course, it's not as simple as that. When humanitarian actors to speak out against the government, their neutrality is questioned. And so they risk not gaining access to the people, and they risk not being able to negotiate with conflicting parties. For example, if the international actors could not act within or near the conflict zones, they could at least maintain a presence in other parts of the country and access people who made it out of the conflict zone. And you could see the military comparison of the state and the rebel groups. Over the next few months, government took an aggressive military strategy.